Celera, a young warrior from the peaceful Celtar race, stood at the command center of her ship, staring out into the stars. Her mind raced with excitement and a hint of anxiety. She had been chosen by the Galactic Council to undertake a mission unlike any other. Earth. The very mention of the name had stirred her curiosity since she had first heard of the planet's reputation. It was a place known for its danger, its unpredictability, and its wild creatures. The Celtar race had heard of Earth's inhabitants, humans, and how they were said to be weak, primitive, and prone to violence. To Celera, this assignment was a challenge to prove her people's strength and intelligence, but most importantly, to prove that she was worthy of the task. The mission was simple. The Council had deemed Earth a Deathworld, a place where life could not exist without constant struggle. The aliens that had encountered it before had failed to tame it. It was a test to see if Celera, a skilled warrior with advanced technology and deep knowledge of alien worlds, could survive the challenges that Earth's harsh environment presented. The Council believed that if she succeeded, that Celtar could learn valuable strategies for dealing with other dangerous worlds, and Earth's barbaric human race could be studied as a potential threat. Celera was both excited and unnerved. She had heard the rumors about the planet's creatures, but those rumors were nothing compared to what she had seen in her training. As the sleek, dark ship moved closer to Earth, Celera could feel the weight of the mission. She had studied the planet's environment for months, familiarizing herself with its strange climates and its volatile nature. The planet was teeming with life, but that life seemed wild and untamed. The storms alone were a force of nature, constant lightning strikes, fierce winds, and torrential rain that could tear through steel. The terrain was as unpredictable as the weather, with dense forests, deserts of blistering heat, and icy tundras that seemed to swallow any creature that dared to venture into them. Celera was determined to succeed, but doubt began to creep into her mind. Her people had never encountered anything like this before. Sure, they had fought wars against other species, but Earth was different. Earth was alive in a way that no other world was. Its creatures didn't follow predictable patterns. They fought to survive. They adapted. The humans, from what little the Council had gathered, were the most unpredictable part of this world. Some of their species lived in cities, others in small villages, but all of them were said to be driven by an ancient instinct to protect their own kind. Their violent history had made them a force to be reckoned with, but despite all the records and reports, Celera had no idea what to expect. The reality of Earth had never been studied in full detail, and now she would be the one to do that. She was the one chosen to face the unknown. Her ship shook slightly as it broke through Earth's atmosphere. The engines roared, and the hull groaned, but Celera stayed focused. She wasn't going to let fear take hold of her. She was a warrior. The stars had shown her countless dangers, from hostile alien creatures to the most deadly of space storms, but none of those threats had made her hesitate. Earth was a challenge, yes, but it was just another world to conquer. She would survive. She had to. The ship descended through the thick clouds, and as it neared the surface, Celera could make out the vast, chaotic landscape below. She had heard that Earth was constantly shifting, its mountains rising and falling, its oceans churning. Nothing on Earth was ever truly stable. The sight of the planet below her was mesmerizing and terrifying at the same time. From space, it appeared beautiful, but she knew the danger it held. The planet seemed to hum with energy, as if the very land itself was alive. Celera's heart beat a little faster as she prepared to land. As the ship touched down, the ground beneath her rumbled. The moment her boots hit the Earth's surface, she felt it, the raw power of the planet. She had expected it, but feeling it with her own senses was different. The ground was alive with movement. In the distance, she could see flashes of lightning dancing across the sky, and she heard the distant roar of something large moving through the forest. This wasn't like any planet she had ever visited. This was not a place for the faint of heart. She glanced at her equipment. Everything was in place. Her Xeltar weapons, designed for quick and efficient combat, were securely strapped to her side. Her armor, lightweight yet durable, would protect her from the harshest of environments. The ship's systems were functional, and her communication tools were intact, but she was ready for the worst. She didn't expect to get help from the Council. This was a test of her strength and resilience. She had been trained for this moment, and now it was time to prove herself. The air was thick with humidity, and as she took a step forward, Celera could feel the weight of the world around her. The trees stretched high into the sky, their leaves thick and vibrant with life. Everything around her seemed to pulse with energy. She could hear birds calling, insects buzzing, and something large moving in the distance. The planet was alive, constantly shifting, constantly evolving. Celera moved cautiously, every sense on high alert. She had been trained to fight on alien worlds, but this was unlike anything she had ever encountered. The air itself felt strange, heavy with moisture and filled with the scent of earth and plant life. The sounds of the forest seemed to grow louder as she moved deeper into the jungle. She stepped over thick vines, careful not to trip on the uneven ground. In the distance, she saw flashes of movement. Something was out there, something big, but she couldn't make it out yet. Suddenly, a loud growl echoed through the trees. Celera froze. Her eyes scanned the darkness, searching for the source of the sound. She had heard about Earth's dangerous creatures, large predators that roamed the forests and plains, creatures capable of ripping through even the toughest of armor. Her heart raced, but she didn't panic. She was ready. She could handle whatever this planet threw at her. She had to. The growl grew louder, and then, from the shadows, a massive creature emerged. It was unlike anything she had seen in her studies, an enormous bear with claws that could rip through steel, its fur matted and wild. Its eyes were a deep amber, filled with primal fury. It snarled at Celera, its muscles rippling beneath its thick coat. The creature lunged at her without warning, and Celera barely had time to react. She reached for her weapons, drawing her energy blade just in time to deflect the creature's massive paw. The impact sent her stumbling backward, and she barely regained her footing before the bear charged again. This was no ordinary creature. It was fast, powerful, and relentless. Celera could feel the ground shake with every step the beast took. She was used to facing enemies that fought with strategy and intelligence, but this creature fought with pure instinct, driven by the need to kill. Her heart pounded as she dodged its strikes, using her agility to stay just out of reach. She slashed at it with her energy blade, but the bear's thick fur absorbed the blows. It was like fighting a force of nature itself. In that moment, Celera realized something she hadn't fully understood before. Earth's creatures didn't follow the same rules as others. They didn't fight for honor or glory. They fought for survival, for dominance over their world. And this creature was in its element, while she was an intruder. Celera's training kicked in. She had faced overwhelming odds before, but this was different. She wasn't just fighting for her life. She was learning, adapting to this wild world. With a final, desperate move, Celera used her technology to create a shockwave that temporarily stunned the bear, giving her just enough time to escape. Breathing heavily, Celera retreated deeper into the jungle, her mind racing. She had survived the first test, but it was only the beginning. Earth was not what she had expected. It was a world of survival, of raw power, and now she had to figure out how to live in it. The question that lingered in her mind was simple. Could she survive Earth's Deathworld, or would she become another victim of its deadly creatures? As she made her way through the dense jungle, one thought kept circling in her mind. This mission would not be easy, but she wasn't going to back down. The adventure was just beginning. Celera pressed forward through the thick underbrush, her mind sharp and focused. The earlier encounter with the massive bear had left her with a deep respect for the dangers of this planet. Earth was nothing like the calculated and controlled environments she was used to. Here, survival was not just about strength or skill. It was about adaptability. She could feel her senses sharpening with every step, her instincts honed to a razor's edge as she carefully navigated the jungle. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the forest floor. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying plant matter, a constant reminder of the planet's untamed nature. Solara had learned quickly that Earth's ecosystem was in constant flux. Storms could roll in with little warning, and creatures that seemed harmless could turn deadly in the blink of an eye. She had already encountered one of the planet's apex predators, but she knew there were far more dangers lurking, waiting to test her resolve. She stopped for a moment, listening. The jungle was alive with sounds, chirps, rustlings, and the occasional growl from deeper within the trees. The quiet was unsettling, as though something were watching her, waiting for the right moment to strike. Solara's pulse quickened, but she pushed the feeling aside. Fear had no place in her. She had trained for this, prepared herself for anything Earth could throw at her. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being followed. Suddenly, a rustling noise came from behind her. She spun around, her energy blade in hand, ready for another confrontation. But nothing appeared. The forest was silent once again, and Solara felt her heart rate slow. She had to stay calm. The environment here was unpredictable, but she couldn't let paranoia take over. She moved again, this time at a quicker pace, eager to find shelter before nightfall. Earth's nights were just as dangerous as its days, and she needed a safe place to rest. Her ship was still nearby, but it was vulnerable, exposed to whatever creatures roamed the jungle after dark. She had learned that relying on technology alone would not keep her safe. She would need to rely on her instincts and the tools at her disposal. As she pressed on, the jungle began to thin out, and she soon found herself at the edge of a vast, open field. The grass here was tall and swayed in the wind, but the space was clear. No towering trees, no dense underbrush. It was the perfect place to set up camp for the night. But as she stepped into the field, the ground beneath her feet shifted. A low rumble echoed through the air, followed by a sharp crack of thunder in the distance. Solara froze, her heart skipping a beat. Earth's storms were notorious for being fierce, but this one felt different. The air around her seemed to hum with energy, as though the very sky was about to explode. Without warning, a massive bolt of lightning struck the ground just a few meters away, illuminating the entire field with a blinding flash. Solara stumbled backward, her vision momentarily blinded by the lightning's brilliance. Her heart pounded in her chest as the shockwave from the strike rippled through the ground. She had been trained to deal with space storms, but nothing had prepared her for the raw power of Earth's electrical storms. The energy in the air was palpable, almost tangible, and she could feel the hairs on the back of her neck standing on end. This planet's weather was a force to be reckoned with. As the storm began to intensify, Solara quickly made her decision. She couldn't risk staying in the open. She needed shelter, and fast. Scanning the area, her eyes locked onto a small cave nestled at the base of a rocky hill. It wasn't much, but it would offer her protection from the storm. Without wasting another moment, she sprinted toward the cave, her energy blade glowing faintly in the darkening sky. The wind howled as she made her way to the cave, her steps quick and steady. The storm was picking up speed, and the air was growing colder by the second. As Solara reached the entrance to the cave, she ducked inside, breathing heavily from the sprint. The interior was dark, but dry. It smelled of earth and stone, the scent of the planet's raw, untamed nature. She could hear the storm raging outside. But here, within the cave, she felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time since landing on Earth, Solara allowed herself a moment to rest. She sat against the stone wall, her energy blade still in hand, but her grip relaxed. The storm outside raged on, but it was a reminder that Earth was constantly in motion, wild, unpredictable, and full of challenges. Yet, as daunting as it seemed, Solara wasn't afraid. She was a warrior, and she had faced worse. This was just another obstacle to overcome. As she sat in the darkness, The sound of the storm outside became a steady backdrop, like the pulse of the planet itself. Silara closed her eyes for a moment, reflecting on the journey ahead. Earth was unlike anything she had encountered, and the challenges it presented were far from over. But she was determined to succeed. She would adapt. She would survive. And no matter what came next, she would prove that the Exceltar could overcome even the most hostile of worlds. The storm outside continued to rage, but Silara felt a sense of resolve settling in her chest. Tomorrow, she would continue her mission. Tomorrow, she would face whatever came next with the same strength and determination that had brought her this far. As the night wore on, Silara drifted into a light sleep, her mind buzzing with the possibilities of the next day. Earth was full of surprises, and she was only just beginning to uncover its secrets. What other creatures lurked in the depths of the jungle? What other tests awaited her on this savage world? She didn't know the answers, but one thing was certain: she would not back down. She had come to Earth to prove herself, and nothing, not even this deadly world, could stop her. When the morning came, Silara would rise, ready for whatever came next. She had faced the first of Earth's challenges and survived. But the true test was just beginning. The planet had a way of making even the strongest warriors question their limits, and Silara knew that this was only the beginning. Whatever Earth had in store, she would meet it head-on. And as the storm outside finally began to subside, Silara's thoughts turned to the one question that still lingered in her mind. Could she truly conquer Earth? Could she survive in this death world and prove that Celtar's superiority? She didn't know, but she was ready to find out. Tomorrow, she would face the unknown, and whatever the planet had to offer. She was no stranger to danger, but Earth was unlike any world she had ever known, and she would not be defeated. Silara woke to the first rays of sunlight filtering through the entrance of the cave. The storm had passed, leaving behind a thick scent of wet earth and fresh greenery. The air was crisp, charged with the raw energy of nature's fury. She stretched, her muscles still sore from the previous day's encounter with Earth's brutal wilderness. Every breath reminded her that she was in an alien world, a place that defied everything she had been taught about survival. She stepped outside, scanning the area. The storm had left its mark. Branches lay broken, the ground was soaked, and the sky was still heavy with the last remnants of dark clouds. But Earth was resilient, and already the sounds of life were returning. Birds chirped in the trees, small creatures rustled in the underbrush. It was as if the storm had never happened. The cycle of life here was relentless. Silara had a plan for the day. She needed to find a safer shelter, somewhere more defensible. The cave had served its purpose, but it was too exposed. If Earth's storms were this violent, she needed a proper base. More than that, she needed food and water. Her survival pack had supplies, but she couldn't rely on them forever. She had to adapt to Earth, to live as its creatures did. With her energy blade strapped to her side, she moved forward, keeping her senses sharp. She had learned yesterday that Earth was unpredictable, that danger could emerge from anywhere. As she moved through the jungle, she took note of the plants and creatures around her. Some of them seemed harmless, others radiated a clear warning. Bright colors, sharp thorns, predatory eyes watching from the shadows. This planet did not tolerate weakness. She came across a small stream, its water clear and fast-flowing. Kneeling, she studied it carefully. Back home, water sources were purified, filtered through advanced technology. Here, she had to rely on instinct. She took a sample, scanning it with her wrist device. The results showed minimal contaminants. Safe enough. She drank, the cold water refreshing against her throat. As she stood, she felt it again, that sensation of being watched. Her hand went to her blade. The jungle was silent. Too silent. A predator was near. A sudden rustle behind her. She spun around, her blade humming to life. And then, from the shadows, it emerged. A wolf, but not like the creatures of her homeworld. This one was massive, its fur a mixture of dark gray and silver, Its yellow eyes locked onto her with intelligence. It was not attacking, not yet. It was studying her, assessing whether she was prey or predator. Solara did not move. She knew enough about animal behavior to understand that running would only trigger the chase. She met the wolf's gaze, tightening her grip on the blade. The beast growled, low and deep, a warning. Solara took a slow step back. The wolf did not follow. Instead, it simply watched her, its ears flicking as if listening to something beyond her understanding. And then, without a sound, it turned and disappeared into the trees. Solara exhaled. She had passed its test. The encounter left her shaken, but more than that, it left her intrigued. Earth's predators were different from the mindless beasts of other worlds. They were cunning, strategic. She had always been taught that humanity was the apex species, that nothing could rival them. But this world itself seemed to be an apex predator. As she continued her journey, she felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about understanding, learning, conquering. If she could master Earth's dangers, she would become stronger than any warrior in her fleet. Hours passed as she moved through the jungle, her eyes scanning for a new shelter. And then she found it, a ruined structure hidden beneath layers of overgrowth. It was human-made, a remnant of an old civilization, long abandoned. Stone walls stood partially collapsed, vines creeping through the cracks. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. Cautiously, she stepped inside. The air was musty, the scent of time lingering in the shadows. Dust coated the ground, undisturbed for years. Solara examined the space carefully. There were signs that animals had passed through, but nothing recent. This could work. She set her pack down, claiming the space as her own. Outside, the jungle roared with life. Inside, she sat in silence, contemplating her next move. Earth was testing her, and she was ready. The night was long, filled with the eerie sounds of Earth's wilderness. Solara sat inside the ruined structure, listening, her senses sharp. Every rustling leaf, every distant howl sent a shiver down her spine. She was trained for hostile environments, but Earth was different. It didn't just challenge her physically. It tested her instincts, her patience, her will to survive. Sleep did not come easily. She kept her weapon close, her eyes darting to every shadow. But as the hours passed, exhaustion took over, and eventually, she drifted into a light sleep, her body still tense, ready to react at a moment's notice. Morning came with the soft glow of sunlight breaking through the cracks in the stone walls. Solara stirred, stretching her sore muscles. She had survived another night. But survival was not enough. She needed to secure her position, gather food, and understand this world's threats. Her first task was to explore the ruins. She moved carefully, inspecting every corner. The place was ancient, the markings on the walls worn by time. It must have been abandoned for centuries. But despite its age, it provided shelter, and that was enough for now. Outside, the jungle was alive with movement. Birds flew overhead, their cries echoing through the trees. Small creatures darted through the underbrush. The air was thick with humidity, carrying the scent of damp earth and fresh vegetation. Solara took a deep breath, adjusting to the environment. She needed to find food. The survival rations in her pack wouldn't last forever. Moving cautiously, she ventured into the jungle, keeping close to her shelter. She examined the plants, trying to determine what was safe to eat. Her scanner helped, but it was limited. It could identify known toxins, but it couldn't recognize everything on this alien world. She had to be careful. She found a bush bearing small dark berries. Her scanner confirmed they were non-toxic. She plucked a few and hesitated before placing one in her mouth. The taste was bitter, but not unpleasant. It would do. As she gathered more, she heard something, a low growl in the distance. She froze. Slowly, she turned her head, her heart pounding. Beyond the thick foliage, she saw them. Not one, but 3 wolves. They were watching her, their yellow eyes glowing in the dim light. The largest of them stood in front, the same one she had encountered the previous day. Silara's hand went to her weapon, but she did not draw it. She knew enough now. These creatures were intelligent. They were testing her. The leader took a step forward. The other two followed, their movements slow, deliberate. Silara tensed, her mind racing. Should she fight? Run? Stand her ground? She met the leader's gaze. A silent moment passed between them. And then, to her surprise, the wolf turned away. The others followed. Just like that, they disappeared into the jungle. Silara exhaled sharply. It wasn't an attack. It was something else, an acknowledgement. She wasn't sure what it meant, but one thing was clear. She was no longer just an outsider. The jungle had taken notice of her, and she had a feeling this was only the beginning. The days that followed were a blur of constant movement. Silara had become accustomed to Earth's dangers, learning to navigate its treacherous terrain with a newfound sense of purpose. Each step she took brought her closer to understanding this strange world, and every challenge she faced seemed to strengthen her resolve. But despite her growing confidence, a gnawing feeling lingered in the back of her mind. Something was watching her, something more than the wolves. The jungle had its rhythm, its pulse, and Silara had begun to feel it, like the beating of a heart beneath the earth. Every rustling leaf, every chirping insect was a part of this living, breathing world. She had learned to listen, to trust her instincts, and yet the feeling of being observed had never left. That morning, after a quick meal of berries and some dried meat she had scavenged from a small animal the day before, she packed her belongings and prepared to move on. The ruins, while a safe haven, were not a permanent solution. She needed something more, a stronghold, a place that could withstand the unpredictability of Earth's storms. She had heard rumors of human cities from the few scattered broadcasts she had intercepted, but they were nothing like what she had imagined. The world was older than she had first realized, much older, and the human presence was sparse. She needed to find answers. Her feet took her deep into the heart of the jungle, where the trees grew thick and tall, their trunks wrapped in vines. The air was heavy, thick with humidity and the faint scent of moss. The further she traveled, the more alien the world felt. The jungle seemed to press in on her from all sides, as if testing her every step. Then, just as she thought she was beginning to make sense of the landscape, she saw something that made her stop in her tracks. A human figure. At first, she thought her mind was playing tricks on her, the fatigue of days without rest taking its toll. But no, there, in the distance, was a man. He stood motionless, facing away from her. His clothes were torn, as though he had been living out here in the jungle for years. His hair was wild, and there was a strange calm about him that unsettled her. Silara moved slowly, her hand on her blade. This man was a mystery, an anomaly. He did not belong in this jungle, not in the way she did. He was human, but he was not like the others she had seen from her observations. As she drew closer, the man turned. Their eyes met. There was something strange in his gaze, no fear, no surprise, just a deep, knowing calm that sent a chill down her spine. He tilted his head slightly, studying her, as if he had been expecting her all along. "You're not from around here," he said in a voice that was both familiar and foreign at the same time. Silara's grip tightened on her blade, but she did not draw it. "I'm not," she answered cautiously. The man nodded. "I figured. You don't smell like one of the locals." He paused, his eyes scanning the dense jungle. "They'll be watching you. They're always watching." Silara's heart skipped a beat. "Who?" He smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "The ones who know this place better than you ever will. The ones who have always been here." He gestured to the jungle around them. "This world doesn't take kindly to outsiders. Not anymore." For the first time, Silara felt a true sense of unease. She had always known that Earth was dangerous, but now she wasn't so sure she understood it at all. The man's words sent a ripple of doubt through her. She was not just an alien here, She was a trespasser, a stranger in a world that had been forgotten by time. "You know this place?" she asked, lowering her blade slightly. He nodded. "I've been here longer than most. It's not the kind of place that welcomes anyone, but you get used to it. The jungle teaches you things you wouldn't believe." He looked at her with a kind of sorrow in his eyes. "You should leave. This place, it doesn't forget, and it doesn't forgive." Celera's mind raced. She had come here to conquer, to survive. She had believed that nothing could stand in her way. But now, with this man's cryptic warnings, she wondered if she had underestimated Earth and its inhabitants far more than she had realized. Before she could respond, the sound of rustling leaves broke the tension. The man's eyes flashed with warning, and without another word, he turned and disappeared into the jungle, vanishing as quickly as he had appeared. Celera stood there for a moment, still processing the encounter. The jungle had not just tested her strength, it had tested her mind. And she realized then that this was no longer just about survival. Earth was a living, breathing entity, one that had a history far older and darker than she had ever imagined. She had been chosen for something that went beyond the physical challenges she faced. And in that moment, she understood that Earth's true danger was not its beasts or its storms, but the very heart of the planet itself. The wilderness had just begun to show her its true face, and Celera was not sure she was ready for what came next. The days blurred into one another as Celera pressed deeper into the jungle. She had learned to ignore the unsettling feeling of being constantly watched, though it never left her. It was as though the jungle had eyes that never blinked. Every rustle in the trees, every snap of a twig beneath her boots made her stop and look around, half expecting something to leap out at her. But each time, there was only the silence of the wilderness. She continued her search for answers, trying to piece together what she had learned so far. The strange man's cryptic warning echoed in her mind, gnawing at her thoughts. It doesn't forget, and it doesn't forgive. What did he mean? Was this place alive in some way that she couldn't yet understand? Was it the jungle itself that watched her, or something else entirely? Celera found no answers in the days that followed. Her attempts to gather more information about Earth's inhabitants proved futile. The city ruins she had discovered earlier yielded only more questions, old, broken buildings with no sign of life. But she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something here. She just needed to find it. Then, after what felt like an eternity of wandering through dense foliage, she came across something new. A clearing. It was strange. A circular area surrounded by tall trees that seemed to bow inward, as though they were protecting something. The ground was soft, covered in thick grass, and there were patches of wildflowers scattered throughout. In the center of the clearing stood a stone structure, weathered but intact. It looked ancient, even older than the ruin she had seen earlier. Celera approached cautiously, her instincts telling her to be wary. There was something about this place, something that felt different. The air felt heavier here, charged with an energy she couldn't quite explain. As she stepped closer, she noticed the markings on the stones. They were worn, like the rest of the structures she had seen, but they were unmistakable, symbols she recognized from the ancient texts of her people. These were not just random markings. They were a language. Her heart skipped a beat. Could this be it? Could she have finally found something that would explain Earth's strange power? She reached out, brushing her fingers against the stone. As soon as she made contact, a surge of energy shot through her. It wasn't painful, but it was overwhelming. A flood of images, sounds, and sensations crashing into her mind. For a brief moment, Celera lost all sense of time and space. She saw flashes of beings. Tall, pale figures standing in the shadows of the jungle, watching her with cold, emotionless eyes. And then, as quickly as it had come, the vision faded. Celera staggered back, breathing heavily. What had just happened? She shook her head, trying to clear the disorienting fog from her mind. She had felt something, something ancient, powerful, and unmistakably alien. This wasn't just a structure built by a forgotten civilization. This was a place of power, a nexus that connected the land, the creatures, and the energy of Earth itself. And now, she realized, it was calling to her. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. There was no turning back now. She had already made the decision to come here, and she wasn't going to leave until she understood what this place meant. Before she could investigate further, the sound of footsteps interrupted her thoughts. Solara's hand immediately went to the hilt of her blade, her eyes scanning the clearing. From the shadows emerged a figure. It was him, the man she had met days before. His eyes were still calm, but now there was something more in his gaze. He had been expecting her, it seemed, and now that she had found the structure, he was here to stop her, or perhaps to guide her. "I told you," he said, his voice low but not unkind. "This place doesn't forgive." Solara studied him carefully. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice steady. "Why are you here?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to the center of the clearing, his gaze never leaving her. "I've been watching you," he said at last. "And I've been waiting." "For what?" "For you to understand." He stepped closer to the structure, his fingers lightly brushing against the stone. "This place is more than just a relic. It's a warning, a message, something that should have been left forgotten." Solara's brow furrowed. "A warning? A message from who?" The man looked at her, his eyes hardening with a mix of regret and sorrow. "From the ones who came before. The ones who built this world, who shaped it. The ones who left, and the ones who still watch." Solara's heart raced. "The ones who watch? You mean the creatures in the jungle?" "No," he said, his voice low. "They're not the ones you need to worry about. The real danger is far older, far more powerful." Solara felt a chill run down her spine. The visions she had seen, those pale, emotionless beings, were they the ones he meant? Before she could ask more questions, the ground beneath them trembled. It was faint at first, but the vibrations grew stronger, more violent. Solara stumbled, her hand shooting out to steady herself. The air seemed to thrum with energy, and the trees around them began to sway, as though something was stirring deep within the earth. The man's eyes widened. "It's happening. The time has come." "Time for what?" Solara demanded. The man turned to her, his expression grave. "To face the truth of this world. To see what Earth really is." And just like that, the jungle around them seemed to come alive. The ground cracked, the sky darkened, and something ancient, something immense, stirred beneath the surface. Solara was no longer just a visitor on this planet. She was at the heart of something far greater than she could have ever imagined.